You're listening to the Family Podcast from PursueGOD.org.
Hey couples, today I want to start a two-part series on a little bit of a heavier hitting subject. Today I want to cover the question and an article that's recently been updated on PursueGOD.org that says, how can you guard against temptation in your marriage? And then I want to follow up with some specifics on pornography and the impact that that has on marriage, on trust, on just the damage that it does to the person that's hooked on pornography and the damage it does to the spouse on the receiving end of that. So, and the reason why I want to do it, honestly, is because a lot of my marriage mentoring in recent months has been revolving around issues. You know, for some couples, it's they were caught off guard by an inappropriate relationship with a coworker, or for many of them, unfortunately, it has to do with pornography, whether it was, you know, an issue they dealt with since they were young or it was something new. But I just feel like it's important because the enemy is just looking to destroy and looking to just distract us from, first of all, pursuing God, but then also just loving and honoring our spouse the way we're called to. So I wanted to just talk today, really just answering this question, because I want to speak to the couples that maybe you're just in a drier season in your marriage. You know, for some of you, it might be the young couples. I remember this, that when my kids were young, especially like toddler age, I was so tired because I had to be, you know, on call. I was on demand all the time, meeting the needs of my kiddos, that there were many times then that when my husband wanted to be intimate, I just didn't have the energy for that. I didn't have a desire for that. So you can see how that could create some problems in the relationship. We're going to talk about some ways you can guard against that, but that can create temptation when your sex life is lacking due to your own energy level. I know, again, another phase of life for us was once our kids were like junior high, high school age, just they're coming and going and coming in later at night. Like it just was hard to find time for intimacy when I wasn't worried about what kid's going to be walking through the door and knock on the door and need something from us. So there's many seasons and different reasons why couples can struggle with intimacy, and that can create temptation. You know, for a lot of people, it's social media. And one of the things that we've always encouraged couples is that you have a shared like Facebook page, because we've known this over the years that if you use things like Facebook or Instagram and you have your own account, there's no accountability of who you're talking to, who might be DMing you, and it just creates fertile soil for the enemy to introduce some kind of temptation. So we really encourage couples. My husband and I have done this for years. We just have shared social media accounts. I mean, neither of us are particularly active on them, but if somebody wanted to private message one of us, the other would be aware of it. So that's, you know, again, that's just like a simple thing to think about. But I just really want to speak to the couples today, whether you're a young couple busy with young kiddos, or you're a couple in the throes of teenage years, or even the couples that are just getting a little bit older and your sex drive is low and you're just kind of struggling to connect as a couple, and it's introducing potentially some temptation for one or both of you. You know, for some of you, it might be that you have a spouse that just emotionally doesn't connect well to you, doesn't speak your love language, and maybe there's the coworker or the friend at the gym or somebody at church in your small group that just really seems to connect with you on an emotional level, and that can introduce temptation as well. Like these are all the things that as married couples to be paying attention to. What are these things going on around us, and what can we do to protect ourselves, our own hearts, and our marriage from these outside temptations being something that leads to destruction? Because what I'm going to follow up with in the next part is going to be about specifics to pornography and just the damage that we see it doing to so many couples and young people that aren't even married yet, but for many married couples as well. So I do want to I think it would be silly of me not to first acknowledge that when we talk about temptation and how to avoid it, that we recognize the enemy's game. So 1 Peter 5:8 says, stay alert, watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Maybe you've been feeling that lately. Maybe you've got that coworker that you have been thinking about, or a conversation that you had and how easy conversation is with that person. Maybe it's somebody at the gym that you happen to to work out at the same time and you're attracted to them physically, whatever it is, I think the first and foremost thing, if you want to protect your marriage and protect your own heart, is to recognize that the enemy is always lurking, looking, watching for our weaknesses and creating opportunities to devour us. Because that's what ends up happening. James chapter 1 talks about this like sequence of events that happens before we're even tempted, that the enemy just kind of drops in something and we start to ruminate on it and we're enticed by it. And then it builds this desire that then becomes full-blown temptation. Like I either am going to choose to walk away from this or I'm going to choose to jump into it. That's how the enemy works, is he's just looking to entice, looking to breed that desire. And we need to just pay attention to that. If we are people that want to honor God with our lives and we want to be true to our marriage vows, then we have to recognize the spiritual battle that is before us and that we need to be on guard. We need to be alert. We need to recognize that when those thoughts come in of attraction to someone or thoughts of how my husband or wife doesn't fulfill me sexually or isn't there for me emotionally or our relationship just feels dead, that those are all thoughts that the enemy will use to entice, to breed desire, and to tempt us to go pursue a different relationship. So what do? How do we guard against that? I just wanted to share a couple of practical things that come from this article you can find on PursueGOD.org that really, it needs to be picturing that you're building a hedge, like a big tall bushes, picture that, or a fence, like you're building a hedge of protection around your own heart and mind and also around your marriage, that you're on guard, you're paying attention to the images that come into your mind. You're paying attention to the way you're interacting with coworkers, how much you're sharing with them. Are you going to lunch or finding opportunities on a coffee break or something to connect with this person? These are all things that you need to say, I can't do that. I can't go to lunch with a coworker from the opposite sex. I can't go to the gym at this time because I see the same person every time. That you're being proactive and looking for how you need to guard and protect your heart, and that you're paying attention to the thoughts that you're having, the things that you're ruminating on, so that you don't feed that desire that then would breed the temptation to then act in sin. And conversely, not only is it being aware of the temptations or that person, but it's also choosing to say, if my marriage relationship is not fulfilling my needs, then what do I need to do to start building into my marriage, right? How do we need to go to counseling? Do I need to have an honest conversation with my spouse of like, hey, listen, I just feel like we're not having sex as often as I would like, and I feel like that's leaving me vulnerable in some ways. I feel like we don't go on dates anymore and you're not nurturing my heart. Whatever those things are, as proactive as you need to be about guarding against the temptations from the outside, it's also taking the time and the energy to build into your marriage and to say, we're lacking in some of these areas. Let's work on that, right? You can invest your energy in pursuing sinful things, or you can put your energy into making your marriage healthier and stronger, especially in the areas that you feel like are lacking or are not meeting your needs, and create opportunities for temptation. Be truthful about that. Talk about it. Get a marriage mentor involved. Go to your pastor, go to a professional counselor and start talking about that. And then ultimately, at the center of it all is that we need to make sure that our marriages are centered on Jesus. We need to make sure that as we're building into our marriage and saying, okay, I feel like we've kind of let life happen. We've let the kids be the primary thing we're focusing on. We're not spending time together as a couple. We're not nurturing a relationship. But even deeper in that is, where is our priority of where Jesus is in my own life, in our own personal life, our own prayer time, our own Bible study, but also what are we doing in our home? What are we doing in our marriage? Do we pray together? Do we ever read the Bible together? Do we talk about Jesus in the home with our kids? Like, is Jesus a priority in our life? Because I'll tell you this, we will not succeed in fighting temptation if all we do is just have our will, just our own will to say yes or no. We need the power of the Holy Spirit to help us, to give us the strength, to give us the wisdom, to give us the insight when those temptations come to say, I know the game the enemy plays. Lord, I surrender that to you, and I need your strength to help me to go towards you and away from that sin pattern. We need to make sure that Jesus is at the center of our own hearts, but then also at the center of our marriages. And if he isn't right now, then that's also another area to build that hedge of protection, is to say, we need to make our faith a priority in our home. I need to make my faith a priority in my own heart, because of course, in marriage, we're going to work, we're going to the gym, we're going to the store, we're going out with friends, right? We're not always together, but there's things that we need to do in our own personal life, our own guarding, our own own hedge of protection, but it's also then coming back to the marriage and saying part of building up our reinforcements is working together, praying together, seeking the Lord together. I also think it's encouraging to remember that in Hebrews 4:15 and 16, it says, the high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he faced all the same testings that we do, yet he didn't sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy. We will find grace and help when we need it most. So we do not serve a God that can't understand temptation. Jesus was tempted over and over, yet every time he used God's word. He went away in prayer to strengthen his resolve. And we can come to him and say, Lord, this is an area of my life that I'm struggling. I'm tempted by this other person. I'm tempted by pornography, whatever that is for you, that you can come boldly to the throne. You don't have to be embarrassed by that. You can just name the struggles, name the temptations, and lay them at the feet of Jesus and say, help me to find the strength that I need to get through this. Isn't that comforting to know that Jesus doesn't look down on us like, oh man, that's too bad for you. You're a loser. You're out. No, Jesus is like, I understand the human struggle. And I faced those testings, yet because he's God, he didn't fall into sin. But he models for us how we can fight those temptations and sins. And we can come to him boldly and we don't need to be afraid, because that's what I want to end with. In this article, it's the radical transparency. That is a key to, again, building that hedge of protection, is that secrecy is the oxygen that keeps the fire of temptation alive. And maybe you've experienced that. You just kind of ruminate on this thought, or you have images, or you imagine yourself with this other person and you feed on that, right? That breeding that desire, breeding that temptation then. And what you need to do is bring it into the light, whether it's a mentor in your life, an accountability partner, or going to your spouse and saying, you don't have to be specific or be vivid in things that you've pictured, but radical transparency matters to snuff out temptation when those embers start flaring up, to say, this person I have an attraction to, and I'm on guard with this person. Like, that's a good thing, because what the enemy wants us to do is to keep things in secret, keep things in the dark, because then he has the power. But if we bring it into the light, it snuffs out that power of secrecy, and you're being honest, that then it kind of gives the name to what this temptation is. It doesn't have the same power over us. So if you really want to guard against temptation in your marriage, radical transparency needs to be a part of that. And that's the story that I've seen time and time again with couples, is whether it's a relationship that was inappropriate and it started as just we'd grab lunch together, and then we started talking about family and then maybe some of our marriage troubles, and then lo and behold, it's this emotional affair begins, and then it eventually turns into the physical. And for others of you, it's a pornography struggle that maybe you've had, and you keep it in the dark and you think, I won't cross that line, or I won't do it again, right? And the reality is, if we keep it in the dark and keep it hidden, it just gives it more and more power. So being honest, being transparent, being authentic, and being truthful is another way to build that hedge of protection, not only around your own heart, but that of your marriage. So couples, I don't know where you are. I don't know if you're in a time of struggle, or maybe you're just in a beautiful summer season of wedding bliss where everything is very easy for you. But for couples that are struggling, who feel a little bit distant from one another, feel tired, feel pulled in many directions, I just encourage you to guard against temptation, to pay attention to where your thoughts are going. How you view your marriage and your spouse. Are you being critical? Are you being hard on them? Can you find grace for them? Can you say, like, I love you more than anything in this world. What do we need to do to get our marriage back on track? And how do we need to get Jesus at the center of our own lives and that of our marriage to help us protect and guard against what I said earlier, is the enemy is just prowling around looking for someone to devour. Let it not be true of us. Let it not be true of our marriages. So I pray for you couples, especially those that feel maybe a little vulnerable. Listen to this, listen to it with your spouse, do this in a small group, talk about this with your marriage mentors, and just be on guard and pay attention to those temptations, and don't let them become sinful acts that you act on.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to give to help support our ministry, please visit PursueGOD.org/donate. Find more resources to talk about these topics with your small group, family, or mentor on PursueGOD.org.